Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Straight Talk with Don Chioffi. I am Don Chioffi, and we're continuing a discussion that we had previously with former Select Board member and town resident Jim Hall. Jim and I have had many discussions about the state of affairs in terms of free speech in the country in general, and specifically in the Rutland region, since that's where we are. And Jim has contributed quite prolifically and heavily to the discussion, political discussions in the Rutland Herald, with letters to the editor and that he has submitted on various subjects. With, I would say, moderate success, but I've been corresponding with the Rutland Herald in terms of their letters to the editor for over 40 years, and I've had a somewhat contentious relationship with them. It's pretty well known in most political circles that the powers that be in the Rutland Herald, going way back to Ken Wild, have had a pretty sincere hatred of the town of Rutland and anything that we accomplished for a long time. Don't give us, well, they give us pretty short shrift on the importance that we have in the community. I'll give you a real short example of that, recent example. These things irritate me because of the pride that I have in my community, and I know others do, and I know Jim does as well. Recently, the Hampton Inn, which is in Rutland Town, one of our proud commercial accounts in the town, along with the former, the Cortina Inn, which used to be the Holiday Inn, and was a beautiful structure at one time. Well, the Hampton Inn underwent some pretty significant renovations, about $3 million worth. I might add that $3 million worth would be reflected in the grand list of the town of Rutland by the listers, of which my wife happens to be the head lister in the town of Rutland, has been a lister for 15 years now. So it's no small thing that $3 million gets added to the grand list. The ribbon cutting that they had, I don't know who set it up. I still don't to this day know who set it up. I have a hunch, based on conversations I've had with a number of people, that the newly formed Reddick, I guess you'd call it the Economic Council, whatever. It used to be the Chamber of Commerce, headed by Lyle Jepson, I think was the one that set it up, but I'm not sure of that. In any case, WCAX covered it, and it was headlined on the evening news. $3 million renovation in Rutland. Said right in the article, in Rutland. And then the Mountain Times picked it up, did an article about the Hampton Inn in Rutland. Well, I'm sorry, folks, it wasn't in Rutland. And, you know, for people that are supposed to be on top of things, you would think WCAX being the legacy electronic media in the state of Vermont, their reporter would at least have passed a geography lesson and know which community he or she is in when they're doing a story, but apparently not, because it was in Rutland. And then you'll get people, and they like to poke the bear. They like to stick a needle in to Rutland Town. I mean, they get some kind of a charge out of doing this. They stick the needle in by saying, well, it's Rutland, it's Rutland Town, Rutland City, doesn't make any difference. Oh, it doesn't make any difference? Well, why don't you call it Colchester then? Well, why don't you call it Middlebury? How about call it Proctor, Pittsford, Danby, Wallingford? Don't you think we have as much pride in our community as all of those ones I just mentioned? Yeah, I think we do. They're not the same. Rutland is a city. Rutland. Rutland Town is a separate community. As a matter of fact, historically, and this is important because there's a lot of people in this community that don't know this. There's a lot of people in my community that don't even know this. Rutland Town was the original community. The original town of Rutland encompassed all of the region. Rutland City, Rutland Town, Proctor, West Rutland. That was all Rutland Town. The charter was given by Benning Wentworth back in 18 whatever to the town of Rutland. And politically, with economics and money and power and so forth, with the Proctors, Redfield Proctor and so forth, over the years, it was decided to split Proctor off. And it was decided to split West Rutland off. And then Rutland City, being the mercantile district, the wealthy district, they wanted the commercial district for themselves, so they petitioned the government to take what they thought at the time would be more than sufficient land for all of the mercantile interests, and then we'll let them old farmers have all that farmland out there, and they can take care of their cows and their chickens and their crops. And that's the way it was split up back then. Well, unfortunately for them, it played out that what was left of Rutland Town was all of the peripheral lands that then became the commercial district for us. And obviously, as important a commercial district as Rutland City's. And why do I say this? Well, I deal with facts. I don't deal with supposition. When we put the 1% tax in, which I pushed heavily for, I mean, I call it my tax, the 1% option tax in the town of Rutland started providing $750,000. Clearly a year later it was over $1 million. Now it's $1.5 million. $1.5 million a year at 1%. And we have to give $30,000 to the city, to the state. That's is part of the deal. Anyways, Rutland City did the tax as well, the 1%. Well, guess what? They're just about $1.5 million as well. What does that say? That says there's as much commerce and industry in the town of Rutland as there is in the city of Rutland. But we don't get that kind of respect from the Rutland Herald, and we don't get that kind of respect from the Riddick or anybody else. We just get lumped in as Rutland. I'm sorry, folks. When I drive on the only interstate we've got around here, that's the one that comes from Fairhaven over here, you start coming in to Rutland, and you see signs there, and it says, Proctor, 3 miles. West Rutland, 1 mile. Rutland. You don't see Rutland Town. What the hell is wrong with the state of Vermont that they can't recognize a community that is as economically viable and wealthy as the neighboring community that's got 5 times the population? Well, four times the population. I don't know, maybe 3, because they're dwindling and we're growing. Well, we got 4,200 people in the town of Rutland. They got, what, 14,000, maybe 15. Rutland City had 20,000 when I was growing up, close to 20,000 people, and it doesn't anymore. Anyways, yeah, pride in your community. Rutland Town is the name of our community, not Rutland. Okay. Anyways, how many letters have they not printed of yours, Jim? I've been rambling on here too long. But
Well, it's been a battle ongoing ever since I moved to town. I was instructed by Dick Del Bianco, God rest his soul, about the difference between Rutland Town and Rutland City and what we did and what we didn't do and what the city did, and he got it right. He was quite a servant for the town, and capped it off all those years by being on the town select board. And boy, I'll tell you, he was a walking library of historical things. He had it all right up here.
Well, you know who's replaced him in that regard now, Jim? We're sitting here, I think it's the people that got their feet on the floor here right in front of us.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you know who the largest taxpayer to the city of Rutland is?
Largest taxpayer in the city of Rutland? No, I guess I don't.
It's called the town of Rutland.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? Between the ad valorem tax, between the water taxes, between the school taxes, it's millions of dollars to the city of Rutland. Millions. We are the largest single economic infusion of money into the city of Rutland, by far.
Well, I know when the mall was built, they were quite quick to ask us for, well, demand of us.
Well, yeah, that was called blackmail.
Yeah.
Act 250 blackmail.
And that's got to be part of that total too, because it was money that went in there too.
Yeah, well, that's part of the ad valorem.
Yeah.
They decided they would do that with every single new business that came into town, because it was displacing their businesses. What? Well, let me ask you something as a logical question. If that's valid, what they did about ad valorem, you know what ad valorem means?
Yeah.
It added value. Because of competitive disadvantage to the city of having the mall out there. Would that work in reverse? Could we, as a town, oppose any development in the city at Act 250 because it would pose a distinct disadvantage or competitive disadvantage to our town?
I think that's a legitimate point, and I don't know that it's ever been tried through the legal process.
Well, you would have to have a board of selectmen that had. Oh, now I'm going to be challenged for a word that isn't going to offend everybody. A set of what's the Spanish called cojones. You'd have to have the gumption, the determination to do that. And you know, well, I said years ago when we were having this discussion pretty heavily about this whole ad valorem thing, because it's always been my opinion that number one, the one mall, which we call the Great Rutland Mall, which I had a business in. I had an ice cream business there in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, was sufficient for the region and should have been allowed to expand, modestly expand, and it would have been fine. But not being one to try to politically control the economy because we're a capitalistic country. I mean, you know, it's freedom of competition, freedom of enterprise. It's none of my business. Somebody wants to put them all in. Zamias wants to come in here and spend $30 million, which he did, spend $30 million building the Diamond Run Mall. That's an economic decision. I don't think it was a wise one, but he wanted to do it, and it was on 7, and you know, so there you go. Rod Galpo and I had a discussion about this, and I said, well, what are we going to do? Rod said, well, I think we should back them. I mean, it's commerce to the city. We've always supported business. We'll support them. But he and I both decided, well, we'll support them, but we do not give commercial stabilization. We give industrial to GE, to Karis Reels, Maltool, Metro Mail, more business forms. We gave millions in tax stabilization to business, but not to commerce. Commerce has to compete on an equal basis, so they don't get any tax stabilization to pay their fair share of taxes. So, but when the city came in and said, well, we got to get this much money from you, or we're going to oppose you at Act 250, blackmail. We won't oppose you, but you got to pay this $750,000 a year, $1 million a year for 10 years, whatever, $10 million. That extra money that they had to pay the city is what caused the demise of that mall. It might not have survived anyway because of competition, but certainly didn't help it for those businesses to have to pay 2 taxes. They had to pay taxes down to Rutland, and then they had to pay the blood money to the city of Rutland. How the hell can a business afford to pay that? Double taxation.
All right. I can tell you from experience, I worked down there when I first came into the area here, right at its peak. And I worked in Sears section. And I'll tell you, there were people there from New York, many people buying stuff from New York and even New Hampshire, which surprised me because there was no equivalent store nearby.
Right.
Sears didn't have one. You had to go to Concord or Manchester to get a Sears store that was on the level of this one here.
Yep.
And that drew thousands of people in here.
Well,
they were buying the big stuff. I mean, I worked in the craftsman section, the tool section.
Tractors.
Well, the tractors weren't in there. That was a separate deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking shop tools and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Table saws and big stuff.
Well, that's because they had a guarantee too. They wouldn't
Well,
replace
that's right.
anything.
The Craftsman name sold that stuff.
That's right.
And people drove miles to come and get it.
Well, when I'll tell you a story about just exactly what you're talking about. Because way back in the day, when we had the Great Rutland Mall on Woodstock Avenue, well, on 4, on Homer Sweet's land. That was Bill Sweet's grandfather. But you didn't know that?
No.
Homer Sweet. He owned all that land. Juster didn't own anything. He leased that. So Homer Sweet made a lot of money on that project there. But and when Juster built that mall, okay, and of course the city was upset because of competition, and Art Sanborn was chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, president of Chamber of Commerce, and I was mall management director. I was my store, you know, I was a store owner in the mall, so, and I decided I'd take on that role because nobody else wanted it at the time. And so Art and I got together and had this discussion about, because it was competition and, you know, it was a city versus the town and whatever. And Art and I were pretty good friends, personally. And I said, Art, look, we can fight over this thing, or we can both win it. And he said, I don't know what you mean. I said, look, the mall's here, it's going to be here. there's only one way that we're all gonna float higher, and that is to build a bigger pie so that everybody's piece gets bigger. Well, what do you mean? I said, let's do some joint marketing. When I say build a bigger pie, what I'm saying is we got to do an outreach, and we've got to market the Rutland region, including our mall and your city, to a wider audience, because once we get more people in here, we'll all do better. And he says, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've done quite a bit of research on malls in general because I'm a store owner in one of them and I got to pay a pretty heavy fee, mall maintenance fees and all this other stuff. Mall shoppers are comparison shoppers. And if they see a mall in another location and they're from an area that has a mall, they want to go to that other one to compare the prices. So if we want more people in the region shopping, we got to advertise in the aviation mall market over in Schenectady, Albany, Troy, Cohoes. That's only a couple hours away, hour and a half. Those people will come over here. And then we got Killington up top, bring them down in to build a bigger pie, you'll all do better. And we did some joint marketing. But long story short, Gilly Godnick, who I had a lot of respect for, he was a great politician, but he was wrong. He fought the mall expansion. He said, over my dead body, the mall's not going to expand. We had to have more water, or we had to have services or whatever. He wouldn't let the mall expand. And that's why, if the mall had been allowed to expand, Zamias probably wouldn't have done his Diamond Run Mall proposition. So he put his in, and then you got the two of them, and there wasn't enough business to support the two of them. And I don't think they advertised in those regions to bring more people in. So it was a struggle for those people at the Diamond Run Mall to try to make ends meet with the expenses they had.
A lot of what we experienced here was word of mouth. People, the communities were rather rural that supported us big time from away. Like Springfield, for instance, and Claremont, New Hampshire, and all of that area. There was tons of folks that came over here. And there was one guy that I remember stopped by my desk one day, and I asked him, I said, is there a Sears store of this size near you anywhere? And he says, no, that's why we're over here. He says, Brattleboro doesn't have one. You got to go down into Massachusetts to find one.
That's right.
And he says, I don't want to do that.
Do you know what it was when I was a kid? There's a comparable example to exactly what you're saying about having access to that kind of merchandising. It was Montgomery Ward, right there in Rutland City, right there on Main Street, right there on Merchants Row. And people came from everywhere into Montgomery Wards. Farmers came from out there. They extended them credit because they knew the farmers didn't have the money until the crops came in. But boy, I'll tell you what, when those farmers came in there and bought, they bought a lot of stuff from Montgomery Wards. And the catalog too. And New York Clothing Store, New York Clothing down on West Street, Lower West Street there, right where the auto parts store is, right on the corner. People would come in, and there was a nice Jewish fellow, the Cantors, owned that store. They live right next to us in the city, and they also extended credit to the farm community. Would come in there, buy their finest clothes for Sunday go to meeting, come in with the kids and outfit them all. Didn't have the money until the crops came in, or until harvest time came. Then they'd come in and pay, and they always paid
Oh, yeah.
Renee. But that was it. I wanted to, I
Well,
wanted to give another little excerpt from the
This,
Rutland Herald because of this. This is a good one. You like this one. Well, as you know, there was a sign in Rutland City. It was a sign advertising the political candidates for election. Well, then they got elected, and the sign stayed up. So I guess it was just to honor the President and Vice President of the United States. You know, Trump and Vance. That sign had been there since I was a kid. Advertising a golf course, miniature golf course, advertising a car wash. And a man named Lenny Natmiller, a nice town resident, or over in Center Rutland near you, didn't happen to be a political kind of guy, really a political kind of guy. I suppose, obviously he's a conservative. He had a sign up back in Trump and Vance. But he also has solar panels. You know, you think, well, he must be a liberal. He's got solar panels over there in Center Rutland. No, he's a smart businessman. His solar panels were paying for most of his electricity for his car washes.
sure.
He had 3 of them. He had one on Ripley Road, one on South Main Street, and the one on Woodstock Avenue.
Yeah.
So the sign was right next to Godnick's on the old WT golf course car wash property. And he bought that property to protect his other investments. He didn't want another car wash coming in, so he bought the property. And he had the sign there, and you know, to advertise it was for sale. He would sell it to somebody if they wanted to buy it, provided there was an exclusion that you can't put a car wash in. So, anyways, he put Trump Vance on there. And people got all upset about this because, well, of course, you can't advertise Trump Vance on a sign like that. Why not? Well, it's his sign. He owns the sign. Sign is legal. He fought a battle about the legality of the sign, and it went to court, and a judge said, it's grandfathered, the sign is there, that's it, it's done. So he already won the issue. I guess he won the sign issue, but he didn't win the message issue. Because these liberals just can't tolerate anybody that disagrees with them.
No.
And they don't want to give you a voice, whether it's right here, now, or whether it's on that sign. That goddamn city come in there and not only took the message down off the sign, they took the whole sign down. Confiscated his property illegally. So I wrote this letter. It's truly amazing how TDS has infected so many otherwise intelligent people to try and deflect their hatred of not only a great man, but a truly great president, probably one of the greatest this nation has ever known, by trying to justify the violation of property rights, First Amendment rights, and simple expression of pride in our current president and vice president. I'm talking about a man who's a longtime property taxpayer, multiple business owner, and law-abiding citizen who owns a property that has had and did have a legally erected long-time sign that was used to advertise different businesses on that property for as long as most can remember. That sign was previously determined by judicial decision to be in compliance and grandfathered to exist on that property. As far as the message on that sign is concerned, there seems to be quite the confusion by many. Prior to November, it surely was a political endorsement message that the owner wished to express as a right under our Constitution. If it was in violation of the size requirements in the city ordinance, like many others were determined to be, it should then have been removed or modified. But no action to do so was ever taken by the city. Though the election is certainly over, a fact that seems to have been denied by a great faction of our more liberal public, there have been moaners, criers, bellyachers hounding city officials to violate this man's rights, which they did. Let's be clear. Following the election, the only thing this message conveyed is the pride and respect that this property owner has for our current president and vice president by saying their names publicly on his own property, in addition to the patriotic display of an American flag. The city itself honors many presidents similarly with street signs for Lincoln, Washington, Coolidge, and Clinton. All street names in the city. Should we remove all of these if someone simply doesn't like their names? Or maybe the city fathers should go even further and remove the name, any name some minority doesn't like, such as Foley or Godnick or Casella or CJ, all of which are prominently displayed in our city. Additionally, the owner has every right to maintain the structural sign long approved and in place to either advertise his property for sale or to advertise a future business. Another closed dairy business, long vacant, can be seen right across Route 7, with no effort on the city to remove that sign. Clearly, the removal of the structure is a gross violation of the property rights of the owner. I was referring to Seward, which is a name. Somebody might not like Mr. Seward. He was a staunch Republican contributor, and he was a staunch chairman of the County Republican Committee for a long time.
Well, all parties aside, he also contributed mightily to the economy.
Yes, he did.
Of this Rutland area.
Additionally, I am told the city not only removed the structure by excavation, they physically destroyed the integrity of the structure by cutting through a heavy steel tubular frame, rendering the owner's property valueless. As long as I have lived in the Rutland region, essentially the better part of 80 years, I've never seen such an egregious, blatant, and arrogant actions of a city government against a law-abiding property owner. This looks like something that would happen in a third world country, and yet another example of the continuing decline of Rutland, with property taxes going out of sight, an affordable housing crisis, a totally debilitating illegal drug crime problem, and a traffic control problem that would give 10 engineers migraines. One would think that these challenges would take a much higher priority than the willful destruction of a man's property out of the vile hatred of a duly elected president and vice president. Is this really what happens when your city is governed by the progressive left? We are better than this. That letter would never get printed.
No.
And that's been it, Jim, for another issue, another time. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for future editions of Straight Talk.